Hey everyone, this is Ramon Mejia for Geek Bytes Podcast. I just finished my interview with Ryan Viken Henning, the author of the Universe Online series. I look up his name. He goes by Viken Online, and I still find him on Royal Road, which is where a lot of his initial writing is at. It was a blast to talk to the guy. He was really nice and charming and funny. I have to give you a heads up though, he doesn't have a webcam, so it's just voice only over the internet for the video call we did. I'll put up a picture to make sure you can see his face, and so it looks a little more natural. But I just want to give you guys a heads up that was a little, characteristic of the interview. But overall, it was a great time talking to him. He talks about his stories, his online stories, what things he's doing in the future, and he actually gets into a little bit of personal history about why he became a writer and what it did for him emotionally, and how it really helped him become a better person in a lot of ways. So I encourage you to check out the interview. Go buy his stuff. It's on Amazon, Universe Online. He has 3 books that he kind of smushed together: Enter the Game and Rise of the Rex. And he's looking forward to publishing his next one pretty soon. So enjoy it, everybody, and remember to go geek out about something. Hey everyone, I'm Ramon Mejia from Geek Bytes Podcast. Now, today I have the honor of talking to a favorite author of one of my favorite novel series, Ryan Viken Henning, the author of the Universe Online series. Now, his series, if you've never read it, you can catch it on Amazon. You can purchase it. I encourage you to buy all 3 books. His story combines LitRPG and sci-fi in a super and fun and creative way, and they have aspects of survival, community building, exploration, and it's all encapsulated in this wonderfully creative VR game world, which I personally really love. Now, I've read all 3 books. I encourage you to go catch them on Amazon. While the links are in the show notes at the bottom of this page. Now, welcome, Viken.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan. Go by Viken. How's it going? You can tell I don't do this a lot.
No, it's absolutely great. I don't think anybody generally does interviews a lot unless you're a professional media person. So it's absolutely cool. I love to have wonderful guests like you on, man. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come and visit.
Yeah, no problem. I was actually looking forward to this. This is my first time.
Oh, no, absolutely. I look forward to these interviews as well. I mean, as a reader of LitRPG and a reader of fiction, I kind of cherish the chance to talk to the creative minds behind the stories that I get involved in. Because when you're a reader of something you love, it almost feels like it becomes a part of you in a way. Like you inhabit that world while you're reading it. And so for a chance to talk to the creative mind who made that world, it's almost like talking to a demigod in a way.
Yeah, I had the same feeling. My favorite reads are the ones I'm able to actually get into. I can imagine myself being in that position. I can imagine myself doing those things, and it just gives me a thrill that nothing else does.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we'll get on to a little bit. Now, for the people who don't know who you are, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your background?
I have a basic, you could almost call it irrelevant background. I come from a low middle class family. I've always had the money issues. My parents were separated when I was young. I was never that great in school. You know how that goes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I hear what you're saying. You're basically the everyman. Most of America could probably relate to you in that respect. So it's super impressive that you've actually taken the time to write such great fiction, considering that background. Now, you're from, I think you said, Kentucky in your author description. So you're kind of like an everyday man. Are you a professional writer? Do you have a professional degree in writing at all?
Oh, no, I don't have any degree. I have a GED, which is saying something, especially around here. I tried the college thing, a semester. Thankfully, it is not $20,000 to $30,000 in tuition I owe and back pay. It's still a couple grand though. But other than that, not really. You could, if I was in Japan or the like, you could call me the NEET, because that is basically what it boils down to.
No, man, I completely understand where you're coming from. I'm kind of a neat myself. I work part of the year, several part-time jobs myself, and I do this, and I write for a website. I have a podcast, and that's my creative outlet. But for the most part, I can really feel you, man. That it's you know sometimes it seems like the writing part is the most fulfilling and interesting part of my life sometimes, and so I get you.
Yep. For me, the writing part is the outlet. The outlet. I you could say I'm the world's biggest consumer. I've read series and series. I've watched TV and anime. I've consumed so much stuff that when it came right down to it, I just needed something before I went boom,
Oh no, I get you, man. I mean, I'm a huge anime consumer reader as well. I'm not the biggest, and I think some guys in our Facebook group on the LitRPG Facebook group will kind of argue with you for the title for the biggest LitRPG consumer. But I get what you're saying. Sometimes you take in so much, and it's so much great world building in your brain that you got to put it out somewhere or explode.
Mm-hmm.
And you took that step though, so that's a huge step, and I'm always happy to see people take that creative step and write. Now, speaking of the things that you have actually written, tell us a little bit about your books. And you have 3 of them in the Universe Online series: Enter the Game Part 1, Enter the Game Part 2, and Rise of Rex. Can you tell us a little bit about those stories?
Well, the truth of it is that there's actually only 2. Volume 1 is Enter the Game. When I first started publishing them, I was doing all the editing and stuff myself. And of course, you're using the tables and you have all the math and everything. So getting it put up on Amazon, it was far easier just to split the volume basically right down the middle, which is where the part 1 and 2 came from. And for volume 2, I've basically continued to practice because it was far easier on me, which is saying something because I'm still late in getting the next one out.
No, I hear you. Sometimes you got to break up your work. And I think that's been the advice from other writers that we've talked to, is that if it seems like too big of a thing to publish and edit all at once, break it into smaller consumable chunks. You can always expand those smaller chunks later to fill it out if you need more pages or need more story. But I think the way you're doing it is really good, because a lot of people would stop at volume 1 and say, this is too much work to do this whole thing. I'm just going to give up. But instead, you were creative and you broke it up into a manageable chunk and you published it. And later on, I know you compiled parts 1 and 2 in just a single volume for the consumer. But you got it out there. And I think that's the really, really important about. Now, can you tell us a little bit about the story of Universe Online? Like, give me a brief synopsis about what it's about.
The story of Universe Online is about a late teen, early 20-year-old guy who was born with basically incurable disease. He's been bedridden since he was a child, in much the same way that, what was his name? I have this problem. I have a hard time with names. Stephen Hawking's. He has the same problem as Stephen Hawking does, in which he becomes paralyzed and basically loses his ability to survive without medical assistance. But thankfully for him, he lives in a near futuristic world in which virtual reality is a real thing. Not only is it a real thing, it's a big part of everyday life. Colleges use it for teaching, schools use it for things like PT, no, PE.
So the virtual world is a little more like Ready Player One, where it's everywhere and everybody uses it all the time, right?
Yeah, it is the primary way that people connect to the information online, basically. No longer do they run around with cell phones. Guess isn't part of this books yet, but they're actually like handheld devices and wrist devices, like wrist computers, that allow them to log into their virtual accounts.
Oh, nice. So, well, we got a nice little exclusive there from your former world. Now, so how does your main character, Alec Wren, in the beginning, come into contact with the virtual reality world, Universe Online?
That's actually quite a bit in depth. Alec Wren has spent most of his life living inside of virtual worlds, playing these games. Everything from other sci-fi genres to what we sword and sorcery, the medieval ages, even some interesting world builders like the strategy games that you'd find on your browser, in which have been turned into virtual worlds of their own, where you're basically playing God and moving pieces around. He's done a bunch of that. He's done it so much, in fact, that he's become a quote unquote expert on it. He has degrees in it, basically. And these companies come to him as an outside consultant. At the start of the books, you're given a look into the beta testing for Universe Online. He was invited into the testings by the company itself, looking for his opinions to see how well he would do and what he could personally use the game world for.
Yeah, perfect. And I think that's a great introduction to the very first part of the Universe Online series, where our Alec is essentially the world's best beta tester, because he spends the majority of his time in virtual environments because he has no other alternative to moving around in the real world. And I think that's really what drew me in when I first read that first chapter of Universe Online. It was that you threw us in the action, and you could tell this was a really good gamer who was thinking outside of the box to solve problems, and then throw him into a survival environment within the virtual reality world. But for Alec, it is his world. It's not virtual to him. It's the world in which he spends the majority of his time in, and
it's the world in which he can live in. Yeah.
Like really live, not not simply exist like he does in IRL, in real life.
Yeah.
So I personally, I love that aspect of the series, and it gets so big throughout the book. I love that about it. Now your books are on Amazon, I believe. Is that the only place you can catch those the Universe Online books and buy them?
Yeah, I had the first two parts up on Nook, but for the 6 months I've had them up there, I made like 4 cents. I literally have only had 2 people buy them the entire time they were on Nook. And I was like, oh, geez. And of course, I've also been talking to guys that are on the Kindle Select program. So we moved them. They are no longer available anywhere else but Amazon.
Yeah. It's I think Amazon has a really interesting place in the self-publishing community. It's just so easy to just upload, set your price apparently to get it out there, and the audience is already there looking for your works when you publish it. And when you have a nice community around you, like I think the LitRPG community is starting to grow as, it makes sales a little bit easier, and it makes it easier to kind of find your audience and have your audience find your work. Now, are you working on anything else at the moment besides Universe Online?
Actually, I write all the time. It's off and on. It's various stories. You mentioned Concordant Falls earlier, which is my new one, which I'm into at the moment. I actually haven't written anything new for Universe Online in quite a while. It's just been one of those things where I do get a bit of editing here and there, and then I set it aside because something else has caught my attention. I'm not a stringent, I have a story, I'm going to write it writer. Which I mentioned to you earlier that I tend to jump all over the place.
Yeah, no, that happens. Your creative process goes where it goes, man. I'm not going to criticize how you write, because it's your brain, it's your stories. As long as I get to enjoy them at some point, I'm happy personally. And I know you write a lot of stuff on, I think, Royal Road. That seems to be the place where you kind of brainstorm ideas and kind of workshop them out a little bit. In searching your page on Royal Road, you're actually listed as Viken, I believe, right?
Yep.
Viken. And I've seen Master of Dungeon, Concordant Falls, and the rest, No Rest for the Wicked. Can you tell me a little bit about what Master of Dungeon's about?
Master of Dungeons is another LitRPG, and it's probably the sort that almost everyone could get behind because it's that traditional. in its own way. Master Dungeons is about a guy who is killed here on Earth and who ends up being transmigrated to a world that has RPG features. And in that world, power is based on basically your character stats. It's all usual. Except in his case, the vast majority of his power eventually comes from the fact that he's able to control dungeons, which are magical constructs. And that actually goes quite into the bit of the history of that world, where humans on one side and magical creatures, which are all quantitatively called demons, live on the other side. And
Yeah,
actually,
I
that's the fact, because there's a massive mountain range that separates the world in two parts. Sorry for interrupting you.
no, you finished your thought. It's I was actually really I was hoping you were going to go there, like describing the world a little bit. Yeah, I love the premise. It's not. I want to say it's not the usual suspects of lit RPG, at least in America. It kind of harkens more back to some Korean lit RPG, some Japanese lit RPG, where your characters are oni and they're demons, and the continent is very firmly divided in half between humans on one side and demons and oni and the fantastical creatures on the other side. And your character is reincarnated as a demon on the demon side instead of being the human world. So you're kind of seeing a different aspect of the fantasy community. In most lit RPGs, in my experience, it's been you're the human, and that's because that's the story that most people can kind of connect to. But in your case, for Master of Dungeon, it's not only a dungeon creation story, it's also a story about a magical monster-based community, and the kind of structure of the society kind of harkens back to a feudalistic system, where you have one guy on top, and then you have a bunch of generals underneath, and he has to expand and control his influence. But at the same time, he has to fight against other people trying to take over and control resources. And it becomes a much bigger story than just dungeon creation. It becomes a matter of taking care of your community and using your power, which is dungeon creation, and using it smartly to kind of protect and defend your society. And at the same time, he's trying to encourage humans to come into the dungeons so that his community can then grow. So I'm always a big fan of Master of Dungeons, just because it's not, to me, the same type of story that we see a lot in other things. It's a much different story, in my opinion.
Yep. And of course, that all harkens back to where I got my own personal start in the lit RPG genre. It was read from Moonlight Sculptor and Monster and several of those that got found that drug me into it. A lot of my writing is based around those Korean and Japanese and Chinese books, because that's where I drew my inspiration from. It's what introduced me to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said, if you haven't thought about it, I would encourage you to actually take another stab at Master of Dungeon, publish it on Amazon, because there's nothing really quite like it there. There's other stuff online that's translated from Asia and Japan and other places like that, but on Amazon, there's nothing that kind of holds that same kind of structure and influence. So I think it's an interesting story that many people would pay to look at personally. Now, Concordant Falls is your latest story. Can you tell us anything about that?
Concordant Falls is a sci-fi take on the cultivation genre, the search for immortality by drawing in worldly energy. Basically, anyone who's never read the Chinese or Korean set of those stories should definitely look into it. Here's my problem with the names again.
Yeah, no, there are plenty of authors. I actually have a list of lit RPG stories just like that on my website at Geek Bytes Podcast. It's like a lit RPG list of stories. So we have plenty of recommendations there if you want to look at those kind of cultivation stories. But I know that's your newest story. You only have a couple chapters, so I'm sure there's not too much to talk about it yet. But that last story we have, No Rest for the Wicked. That one has quite a bit. Can you tell me something about that?
Not really, because I don't remember off the top of my head. It's been a while.
It's been that long. Okay, well, sorry about that. But
No
again, folks,
problem.
you can always catch his stuff on Laurel Road, where you see him working on. You'll find most of the stuff that are under Viken. Now, we're talking about lit RPG a little bit more. All your stories are in the lit RPG genre. What does lit RPG mean to you, and why did you decide to write in that genre?
Well, not all of them are into that genre. Some of them were just the crazy writing that I wanted to do, but several of them were based on it because it was so easy. I have played games since I was a kid. I have played all these characters in Dungeons and Dragons, Vampire the Masquerade for tabletop, Baldur's Gate for PC. Those were the things I did as a kid. So having the dice rolls and the character sheets and wanting to play a wizard that specializes in true word magic, those were the things I was into. Okay.
No, I hear you, man. I love all those things personally. And that what drew me into the genre itself. So I think I can feel you.
hmm So when I first found about like the virtual reality stories and stuff online, I was like, whoa, this is awesome. And it's really easy because when you're talking about reality in real life, you can point at a guy and go, well, he's a strong man, but there's no quantitative way to depict how strong or how smart a person is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the whole point of lit RPG is that you have a numeral value that you can look at and go, wow, he has intelligence over 500. He could probably squash me like a bug. That's the sort of thing that it makes more sense in a way.
No, I hear exactly what you're saying. I feel the same way about the genre. It's that it's the aspect of understandability and
Mm-hmm.
quantifiableness of that world. Like it's not just weird ununderstandable social structures or just mystical magic. It's based firmly in something that the reader can grasp and take a hold of and understand. If they do a little bit of tiny research or just read the story, it'll usually explain that kind of game world where you have your stats, where you have your progression. It
Mm-hmm.
makes sense to a lot of gamers because that's what they're used to. They're used to. I mean, personally, I've read 4 or 5, 6 dozen Dungeon and Dragon manuals. Even though I've never played the game,
Mm-hmm.
I've read the manuals and I've studied them because I loved the game system. I loved the numbers. I loved knowing how making a roll for intuition or for climbing or whatever, or to figure out how much damage I would do if I was wielding a bastard sword or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
All that math stuff made sense to my brain in a way that makes writing or reading that stuff understandable. And I would personally never feel comfortable writing like something in high fantasy or like a traditional space opera because I have no experience in that. I have nothing that I can draw from to make my stories understandable or interesting. But in gaming, I played games my whole life, so
Mm-hmm.
that I see where the draw is, man.
Well, Universe Online, in a way, is space opera. It's the way I set it up, and it's the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
But the system for Universe Online, which I created, as you know, is totally different than the usual. Here's a bunch of stats. You're stronger the more numbers you have in them.
Right. It's a I think you call it a web based skill system. Is that what it is?
The concept web is, yeah, basically it gets back into the story of Universe Online, because what this company actually did is find a way to digitize the soul. So the concept web is based on around a person's innate talents, but offers the sort of customization that I dream about in games in this day and age.
Yeah. When I read your description of the skill system and how you can break them into pieces and connect them to other skills to get bonuses, and you can get enhancements to increase those bonus
Mm-hmm.
structures. It was almost like playing Legos with your skill system, where
Mm-hmm.
you interconnect them and have multiple different webs together. It reminded me of a combination of like an older Final Fantasy system I remember
Mm-hmm.
seeing. where the skills were
Yeah, the
connected.
orb system. I've actually been told it
Yeah,
looks like that. But
yeah. In my mind, that's what I see. Yeah,
in my mind, though, have you ever watched Stargate Atlantis?
yeah,
Okay, you know how Atlantis is basically a big circle with spires that go up around its circumference and stuff. That's
yeah,
the way
yeah.
it looks in my mind's eye.
Oh, I see.
Because the further away you get, the smaller the pieces, the smaller the buildings are. But when it comes together as a whole, it's like a giant monolith that rises into the heavens. That's the way it looks to me.
Okay, so that is an interesting structure system that looks a little bit more complicated than it is in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's why my brain didn't make the picture, because that's a little
Well,
higher order than
I had
I
to
normally think.
I had to describe it as a web because it's really hard to get into. It's really hard to describe because I
Mhm.
have this mental image and that doesn't exactly translate.
No, the fact that it describes as a web makes perfect sense to me, and I think it was a good choice to make it simple,
Mm-hmm.
as far as like visualizing how the pieces go together, but
Yep.
then describe in detail how it actually works together. That way, people can use their own imaginations
Yeah.
to fill in the visual images. So I think that was a good choice as far as the writing style goes. Now, moving a little bit into your writing career personally. Now, you said you're not a professional writer. That you graduated high school with a GED. No professional degrees or anything yet.
Nope.
Yet your stuff is really clean. It's really nice. You must put a lot of work into it. When did you decide to become a writer?
Oh geez. I didn't actually grow up wanting to write. I grew up reading, and I've read a bunch of stuff over the years. I actually had no aspirations. By the time I got out of high school, I was so burnt up that I didn't really want to do anything. I just wanted to roll over and sleep. I'm quite literally that manic depressant guy curled up in the bed in the dark, just whiling the days away. Um, but it eventually got to the point where I just had too much stuff going on. I couldn't keep hold of it. So I sat down in front of my computer, pulled up, yeah, I actually started writing on Notepad because I didn't have anything installed at the time. I still don't have the money to get like Microsoft Word, so don't even go there. And I just started writing. Yeah, I dumped out a whole bunch of stuff. It was bits and pieces of stories and ideas and a bunch of screaming, blood curdling, I'm going to rip this guy to shreds action. And none of it made sense. It was not a singular story. It was just whatever I could dump out all at once. And then I was like, that actually felt really good. So I
And
went
then you
back.
had the bug.
I went back and started thinking. And actually, Masters of Dungeons was the first full story that I started. And once it started getting popular and stuff, I started reading other stories on Warrior Road. And I read a couple of sci-fis, and I was like, I could do something like that too. And that's where the ambition for Universe Online came from.
That's amazing. I got to say, it sounds like writing became not just a creative outlet for you, but also an emotional and almost a therapeutic outlet.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's quite true. I read to bury stuff, and I write to let it all back out.
Hey,
And
that's a very healthy way of doing it. I gotta
yeah,
say, it's much better than the alternative way of just exploding emotionally at somebody. You have a way to funnel, those thoughts and emotions that sometimes you don't get in real life, and I think that's real healthy. So I'm glad for you.
thank you. Yeah, on that topic, some people have actually come to me asking if I was all right and stuff in like private messages after reading a chapter I posted that day, because I do hang that emotional state out in public and it influences my writing. It does.
Yeah, no, I think I thought the same thing occasionally when I read a few of your stories. on where I'm like, wow, this guy is. I think he had a bad day, and it makes sense. I'm like, I'm okay with it because you took that bad day on the computer on those keyboards typing hard. I'm sure instead of on somebody in real life, and hey, that's a much better way of doing it, in my opinion. I wish more people had that ability, or at least that courage to funnel their emotional thoughts and their energies into something creative like writing instead of being jerks or means or trolls on the internet.
Well, in a way, people do it. People write poetry. They get online and chat up with friends. Even the trolling, you know who's a troll because they typically have a bad day every day. So they go online to share the pain. And while it's not very nice and considerate to the rest of us, yeah, it's the way the world works, right?
That is the way the world works. I just think it's much healthier the way you do it and the way other people, other writers do it. They do it in a creative, structured way, and it makes for a really interesting world sometimes because those emotions really come through in your writing. Whether it's joy or anger or sadness or happiness, there are things that you can draw on from your personal experiences, and it comes through in the page as being authentic because those are things you actually felt. Those are things you actually experienced, whether it's frustration or anger or love or hate, whatever it is, because you have that practice of going from heart to paper, essentially. It kind of shows. I think a lot of people connect with your stories that way because they can empathize, or they can say, I felt that way. I've been angry, I've been happy, I've been sad, I've been in love, whatever.
Yep.
And they make that connection with you. Well,
that's the way the best stories should be. Take like Lord of the Rings. The author went through World War One. He had been there. He had experienced, happened to slip through enemy lines and stuff, and those experiences still echo through his work. And the fact that he did it on fiction is even better.
oh, absolutely. I mean, Tolkien wrote. He created basically the whole world story and made a whole fantasy universe out of it. I mean, made his own language structures, had his own factions. It was a beautiful story. But what you're talking about essentially is, writing from what you know. And I think both you and him have that in common. And even though they're different genres and they're different time periods, I think they have that in kind of. We think a lot of good writers do that. Even though if they exaggerate or make it fantastical, they're really drawing from their own experiences and putting it on page, and people can connect to that. Now, speaking about a little background on your writing schedule, do you write full time as an author or part time?
I consider myself a full time part timer, mainly because I don't work. I do not have a traditional career. I'm a cave troll.
No, I'd say writing can be work, man. I mean, I know plenty of people in Hollywood and LA who are full-time writers, and that's what they do. They get paid for it, and you're definitely getting paid when you publish your books on Amazon. So I wouldn't say you're unemployed. I would say, your job is a writer.
Well, I call myself an amateur writer. Self-published author is the way I usually say it when I introduce myself to others. And as for making money, I make about minimum wage, truth be told. And
I gotta say that's better than a lot of people. So especially on like an economy like ours, it means something. So don't denigrate yourself, man. You're an author. You're a published author, and not everybody can say that. And you're, even if it's not like millions of dollars that you're making, you still support yourself on this writing thing, and not everybody can. So it's I don't put yourself down. Don't say I'm an amateur author, because you're not. You're a self-published author, and I think that's a good title. I mean, so be proud of it.
Thank you.
Now, what is your kind of writing situation and schedule like? Do you write every single day of the week? Do you just write on weekends? Do you have like a word count goal of the day or something? How does that work for you?
It doesn't. Basically, I write when I'm in the mood for it, and if I'm not, I'm usually head deep in actually reading or watching something. Usually when I have a storyline that I'm starting out on, I'll write once a day and try to complete an entire chapter, which is between 10 and 20 pages long. You noted that earlier, and my post links and stuff on Moral Road when you went and checked it out.
Yep.
That's usually the standard because I do not like the little bitty chapters. It's actually one of the things I despise about the Japanese and Chinese web stories and stuff that are translated, because those chapters only have like 1,000 to 1,500 words, and it drives me crazy waiting for the next one to come out to continue the story. And traditionally, I grew up reading the big books. Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, they're all done in chapters which have dozens of pages sometimes. And that's basically how I write as well.
Right. So are you a structured writer? Like, we have an outline, or you just kind of from brain to page?
Brain to page. But that said, I usually have an idea of what I want a specific chapter to be about, not only to continue the story, but to introduce the new elements into the story as well. But when it comes all down to it, it's brain to page, which has actually got me into some of the trouble with Universe Online, because I've brain to page so much that I couldn't keep up with the notes.
No, I hear. I started my own story, and I'm like, I have to have an Excel sheet of all my characters' names and like powers and abilities and like item names and descriptions. Otherwise, I forget, and I always have to refer to it on a regular basis. Like, what was that guy's name, or how is this item described? So I get you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you said that you're more of a flow of thought kind of author. Does that make it easier? What's the easiest and hardest thing about writing to you then?
The easiest thing about writing is actually just getting it out, because I am that sort of flow of thought author, and I can basically go on a tangent from one subject to another, and while it may come off as confusing, it's just the way it makes sense to me. I am not a linear thinker in that way. I cannot just stay on one subject and continue with it on and on and on. Just thinking about it makes my brain want to melt. Now, the hardest part, on the other hand, is, as we said previously, keeping up with all that information. Because as the subjects get dispersed, it's harder and harder to keep track of it all. And I've known some guys who'll basically pin up like the board on the wall and sticky notes with strings attached, trying to keep up with their idea webs and stuff. And just looking at it makes me want to go cross-eyed. And in fact, it's probably what I need to do myself.
Hey, like, whatever works for you. Like I said, your stories are working. I love the I love the Universe Online. I like the Master of Dungeons. So it's working for you, whatever you're doing, man. And every writer is different. I mean, I've read books from, how to write your first novel, or I've talked to other authors, and everybody does things a little bit. And if it works for you, it works for you. I mean, feel free to take in other ideas of like how people see things, and try it out. And if it works for you, great. If it doesn't, discard it, because right now you're the things that you're doing are working.
Yep.
Even if it's confusing and long-winded and you have to edit a lot later on, as long as it's working for you, I say continue on with it. It doesn't necessarily work for everyone, obviously, but I think the final result kind of speaks for itself. Your stuff is out there on the road. It's on Amazon, and a lot of writers who maybe been writing for 10, 20, 15 years, whatever it is, they never got to that final step, so you've beaten them out.
Yeah. I actually have a friend, on and off again girlfriend, to be honest, that she wants to write. She wants to get into it. She wants to be able to express herself, and she does write good. I've read some of her works, her short stories and stuff, but she is forever fretful about actually pushing it out there, because she just doesn't want to look at the criticism.
No, that's, and I get that. I mean, personally, I'm afraid as well. I mean, I'm writing it. My wife edits it every day that I write in exchange for foot massages, and she loves it. But she's my wife, man. I expect her to enjoy my writing stuff. But on on a different part of me is very afraid of like criticism or like putting like my creative work out there for the world to consume and analyze and pick apart. And I know some people aren't gonna like it. I know some people will love it, and I get that fear holds people back. And I think one of the things that I love about doing these interviews the most is that other people can see that happens to people. Like even you as an author, you feel that way, but you push past it. You move past. You don't let that fear stop you. I mean, and so that's the hard step for a lot of people. They may be super great writers. They may be super creative. They have these massive worlds in their minds that are just pouring out these pages. But unless you overcome that hurdle of putting it out there, no one's ever going to be able to appreciate it. And I think that's a waste of creative genius sometimes.
See, when I started writing, I didn't have that problem. I came up from nothing. I didn't even have a bank account. I was only a couple of steps away from being homeless. And when I first started publishing my writings on Royal Road, I did it to get the attention because I needed validation for the reason I existed, basically. And there was no fear there. And in fact, when the first comments started coming in, I was incomparably excited. Even though some of them were like, okay, I do have a problem with grammar and stuff. Remember, these first ones were written on Notepad. It didn't have the spell check and stuff.
Right.
I had to go back and redo those. But even the criticisms were like, hey, at least...
Kind of excited. Someone's reading it. They don't like it, but they read it.
Yeah, like Concordant Falls, which I only had the prologue and one chapter out at the moment. When I posted it on Royal Road, when the first view came on, I was like, yes! And even now, the views are only like last time I checked last night was like 50 average views, which that's fine. It starts out that slowly anyway. But I didn't have that fear when I had to go into it because I was that desperate. I needed that release. So, and that's the way it worked for me. And I can understand why others would fear it. But at the same time, I'm like, it's like chicken pox. You get it once and then...
Yeah. No, the fear bubble, once you pop it, that's it, man. I mean, I hear you. It's much worse in your mind probably than it's going to be in reality as far as like the criticism goes. Most of the people that read, they paid their money to read your book, or they read it online. They took the time to read it out. So they're already invested, in seeing your story. And most of the people that I've come in contact with, as far as in the LitRPG community or in the writing community, they're usually pretty decent about it. They understand the same fear of criticism, and so they're usually pretty constructive. I mean, there are always going to be those jerks and trolls, slam the banhammer on them. If they're getting like out of control, if they're not being constructive, of course. But I think that just that fear is bigger in people's minds a lot of times for publishing than it needs to be, than the reality kind of says it actually is.
Well, Winston Churchill said the only thing to fear is fear itself, and fear comes from the person. So if you can beat your own fear, there's no reason to fear it anymore. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the. Do you have your writer's block? I'm curious. We're on the subject of writing, so I might as well talk about some of the feared writer's block. Have you ever gotten that?
Yes, and sometimes it can kick my booty for days. But
so how do you overcome it?
I switch off. I move to something else, which is basically how I went from Master of Dungeons to Universe Online. It wasn't just that I had the idea, it was also that I was stuck. Okay. Master of Dungeons, it was like chapter 7 or 8, and I was just blog. I had ideas, but I kept typing the same chapter over and over again because I just couldn't get it out. So I put it away and started reading and came back again and was like, let's see how this works. And that was the start of Universe Online.
Oh, hey, that makes perfect sense to me. I mean, sometimes you run out of gas and you got to refill with other creative outlets. You got to consume, Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings or what sci-fi or whatever it is, and that refills your creative tanks a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can output again. Or sometimes, like you said, sometimes you have to just empty your mind and
Mm-hmm.
let the juices flow on their own and just go do something else. I think that's a good writing tip for people when they get stuck is just stop worrying about it. Just empty your space in your brain where that exists, and the answer will come to you later.
Mm-hmm. For the most part, to get over writer's block in such a way, you don't need to actually focus on writing something else that you're going to go forward with. You just need to have something that you can focus on for the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you're centered again, it's easier to contemplate back on what you are doing, what you are doing before. That's not the way I work, but it's the best approach to it.
Yeah, man. If it works for you, if it works for other people, I think that's some pretty good advice. Now I know that all your Universe Online stuff is actually self-published on Amazon, which we talked about a little bit. How have you found that particular option of self-publishing on Amazon? Does it work for you?
Oh yeah, it was quite easy. I had more problems with getting Amazon to work well at my bank than I did with actually getting my books on there. When I first started, though, the biggest problem I had was getting the cover done because I had a cover. I did the editing myself, in which
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a autistic genius. The actual pictures I use are from a guy who offered them to me for free on Royal Road, and I'm forever thankful for that.
Do you want to give him a shout out?
Yeah, he already knows who he is. I don't
Yeah,
remember
but
his
for the
name.
Oh, okay. Man, I
I,
won't. I
I,
won't bring
I,
it up. So, well, at
yeah,
least he knows if he's listening that you're appreciative of his generosity,
well,
and because
I
that
have
was
his
really nice of him.
I have his name listed as the cover author. Well,
Oh,
the
good. So you gave credit, so that's good.
yeah, I gave credit. I just don't remember his name off the top of my head. I had
Yeah,
that
that's
problem.
okay. I'm the older I get, the more names I forget. So I
Yeah.
hear you. So you're self-published. I know a lot of self-published authors actually. The success of their book almost pivots on reviews a lot of time. Was it hard for you to get like people to review your book and like to give it good ratings?
I actually never looked at it. I have read the reviews that came forward, but I never went out and tried to get like good reads to review my book.
Mm-hmm.
I have not pushed for the publication, the reviews, the publicity. It's just not how I thought to do things.
Oh no, yeah, I figured that
Yeah,
part out when I went to look for your stuff, like your Facebook page or your web presence. I'm like, there's nothing there. I'm like, he has no author website. I think you just have like the Amazon author page, but
mm-hmm.
like you have a Twitter account which we'll put the links for on like in the show
Yeah.
notes. But that's kind of it. You don't have like a huge like fan presence on the web personally. So I'm like, oh, that's either really good or really bad, and it's working for you. So I do think it's interesting that the people who reviewed your stuff just did it because they liked it. I
Mm-hmm.
think that says a whole lot about how much they enjoyed your
Yeah.
work.
To me, I am not the social butterfly. I do not go out to parties. I do not go out. Yeah, I had not been to a family reunion in quite a few years. I don't keep up with my Facebook. It's just not me. I do not have that care. And while I like to sit down and discuss my work with colleagues and stuff on like the chat on Royal Roads, I don't care for the drama that comes with a fan base, if you know what I mean.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
They
the
require some upkeep. I'll give you that.
yeah, the the trolling and the offshooting, the issues that go on, I just don't have that care. And while I'm always thankful and my my author's notes in the published books, I always thank the readers and those that buy. It's I'm just not that social person.
No, no, I hear you, man. I'm personally, I can empathize with you. So when growing up as a teen, I was exactly the same way. I spent most. I was an indoor kid. I'm still an indoor kid. I
Yep.
spent most of my time inside, writing, reading, video games, that kind of stuff. All my favorite things are inside. My
Mine too.
television, my computer. So I get what you're saying, man. But it's at the same time, I love the online community we have, and I look forward to like talking to people in real life about the same things. It's, for me personally, this is just me. Um, the aspect of doing this type of video, like speaking with people, like looking at them and seeing their expressions of joy when you're talking about something that you love, that to me is an added flavor layer in a conversation. Like just like I'll speak from my experience talking to people in our Facebook LitRPG group, is great. I mean, they're
Yep.
fans of the genre. You have something you can connect to, but just typing with them is, it only fulfills a certain level for me. And so talking either by Skype or like in interviews with authors, that to me is just like that added bonus level of communication. And it's, I'm not too great in a crowd either. You know, I go to a party, I'm that guy in the corner.
Yeah.
I'm a heck of a surprise that someone decided to marry me,
Yeah.
because it was definitely socially awkward. And she's a gem, so I'm certainly happy to have her. But I was that guy too, and so
Yeah.
I can empathize with how you feel.
Well, here, Kentucky is not known for its creative minds in a way. We have smart people and Western Kentucky University and Kentucky uh, University of Kentucky and stuff, but let's get right down to it. Kentucky's more known about beer and bourbon and going out and having fun in the mud than sitting at home and playing games all day. So I always had that distance
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't get what the others were into growing up, and they didn't get what I was into. I was always the nerd. And yep.
Yeah, I hear you.
So
Yeah, but it's always good when you find your community. I think that's one of the goals and things that makes life worth living, is when you can find your people. And I gotta say, man, if
yeah.
you're a writer of LitRPG, you have a community. You have a group of
Yep.
people who love reading and love writing the same stuff you do. So I'm really happy that I hope that you can consider yourself a part of the community, and
I
that we're your people.
I do, and I've actually been more open and honest. You can look back through my releases on World Rogue and see where I've responded to questions and the criticisms and comments on the forums after I've released a chapter. I've been quite active with it. It's just I don't have any experience,
And I
and
mean, baby steps. That's what it takes, man. Sometimes just
yep.
little baby steps, adding to long strides, adding to longer journeys in life. So we'll move off those topics. Let's give you some questions from the audience. I put on Facebook. I was going to be talking to you today, and we have some great audience questions from people who've read your works and are interested in you. So we're going to begin with the big question that everybody's mind after they read the first part of Rise of the Rex. When will you have a full second book ready? That's from Justin Johnson.
Originally, it was supposed to be out on the 10th,
Oh.
but the real life here is not very indicative to being able to sit down and spend hours at a time editing. My mom has stage 4 cancer.
Mm-hmm.
My dad is in nursing and rehab here in town. He's about to lose his leg. It is just crazy, and it's been crazy since November of last year. And for a while, I actually had to put everything down because I was needed here.
No, I hear you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to hear that those things are occurring in your life.
Thank
But
But
I think we all hope that things get better now, so that you can go back to the things that are creative outlets for you,
yeah.
and hopefully those situations improve a little bit more. I know my mom's gone through breast cancer. She survived and everything, so I can empathize with you do a little bit, and in the amount of care that kind of takes, and the kind of emotional energy that then kind of saps from you. So I can hear you in that respect. So have you actually written the end of Rise of Rex 2, and you just need to edit it?
Yes, it is. The actual chapters are done up to 20,
Mhm.
and each book is 10 chapters. So the actual end of the book is done. I have not yet completed the bonus material, which there's actually going to be a little bit more compared to the last one, which I did receive criticism about, but it was what I had to go with um, for the full release. It's just all the editing and stuff, and I
So
actually need
right
to
now
go.
the answer is it's going to come when it comes, guys. You're going to just take that George R. R. Martin approach and say
Yeah,
it'll be ready when it's ready. You're not taking extra
yeah,
time. You're not taking a vacation. Just real
yeah,
life. So there you go,
yeah,
guys. So
yeah. It
we got
should.
yeah.
If I give a definite, the end of the month, the start of next month.
Okay, so not that
Yeah.
long to be honest. So that's
No.
pretty good. So hey, I think that'll satisfy everybody who's looking for the next addition to your series.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Anthony Bauer.
Mhm.
Are you continuing Universe Online, or are you working on a new project? And where are you posting these days?
Given that I haven't been writing much at all, I haven't been posting anywhere until very recently, just the other day with Concordant Falls. As for Universe Online itself, yes. The big answer is yes. It is not dropped, it is not done. Volume 3 is going to get, it's going to be different than the first two because the MC, the main character, is going to go his own way, at least for a while.
Okay,
Yeah.
that works out perfectly. Yeah. We don't want to give too many spoilers away. So thank you for that little bit. We're glad to hear that you're going to continue Universe Online. Now, you also mentioned though that you might be thinking of publishing some of your other stories. Is that still the case?
Yeah. Master of Dungeons, I've actually been thinking about doing it before, but the premise of Master of Dungeons is adult material. It just has that blood and gore and the heavy, sweaty drama that here in the US and in Europe is not good reads for teens, for kids.
Oh, I see. So look, throw out a little disclaimer at the beginning. Say
Yeah.
this book contains, whatever
So
it is,
it's
and
something I've been
yeah,
hesitating over for that reason because let's face it, as adult material, there is smut in it, and
no,
that's
yeah.
not into.
There's a little bit of there's some sex scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, you were nice enough to say there are some sex scenes. If you want to read them, click
Yeah,
here on the road section. I don't click because it's not part of the genre that I like. But
yeah.
if you want to throw it in there, you just people
Well,
who read it are gonna like it or they're not. But it's something you have, and I think
mhm.
it's a good addition to the genre. If your concern is that it's not for everybody, no book is for everybody, man. I mean, just put the
Yeah.
disclaimer out there that this book contains adult material,
Mm-hmm.
violence, graphic language, sex, whatever the case is. Or if you want to cut out
Yeah.
the sex, that may be that last little step that makes it a little more palatable
Yeah.
to a lot of people. Those are your editing decisions. That's completely up to you.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good story otherwise.
I'm probably gonna end up having to fade it to black because it does. Part of the storyline does depend upon it. It is not just the sex for the sake of sex,
Right.
which some authors do it and be like, yeah, that's all. Yeah.
Like you can tell that's their core point sometimes, and some
Mhm.
and those that stuff is romance novels to me. Those
Yeah.
those books that where the sex is the core aspect of it and romance, that's cool. You can have game elements in there, but it's not really lit RPG. It's more
Yeah.
of a romance genre. And yours, I mean, I've read it before, so it's like a really small aspect, but it is part of the story that people mate, and that kind of leads into other things,
Mm-hmm.
within the storyline. So, like I said, I like the story. I encourage you to publish it, but that's just my 2 cents, and I know there's some other readers who would probably agree. Let's move on to our next question, though, from R. Dell Richardson. Who is your favorite author, and what is your favorite book?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I'm an all consumer kind of guy. I'll pick a series and I'll read that series straight through. And I'm not the sort of nitpicky person that'll go, I like that, but I don't like that. So when it comes to books and stories, it's either I like it or I don't.
Okay, let me
Yeah,
put it to you a different way then. What book have you read multiple times you enjoyed it so much?
all of them. um, I have a small bookshelf right behind me that's full of like the Harry Potter novels and Terry Brooks's Chronicles of Shannara novels and some sci-fi works from Hamilton. I read them over and over again. And I do the same with the books I have on my computer, like from John Ringo, and it's one of those things.
See, man, I think we just named 4 or 5 authors and series that you really enjoy. I think that kind of answers Ardell's question. See, wasn't that hard? Just got to throw out some names and
Yeah,
titles, you know?
yeah, but none of them are really the one. Everyone wants to know about the one pick, the one choice, and I'm not a one choice type of guy. If I
Hey,
like the books, I'll read the books. That's all it comes down to.
no, I hear you, man. I feel the same way. A lot of times, I don't have one favorite child. You know,
Mhm,
they're all special to me in my own different ways. Whether it's the Wheel of Time series or Lord of the Rings or whatever,
mhm.
they're all my favorites in different ways. So I get what you're saying, but I think you just want to see like what the kind of stuff that you're looking for. So I appreciate you answering that question.
No problem.
Um, Next question is from Arian Weingrad. Hope I'm saying his name right. He actually has a two-parter. Maybe you'll answer at the same time. The first question is, why did your series start with so much technical expertise and hard work necessary to accomplish anything, and then life got kind of easily for the main character?
Well, that's the progression. The first the first part is basically the test. The test to make sure he can survive at that point, and if it comes right down to it, manage to keep his life and live himself. Even if nothing else came on, he could survive in that derelict in that space station. He could make his own water, find his own food, gather his own resources. And if it came right down to it, he could escape on his own. The first part is the test, and then afterwards, when you have more manpower, the personal aspects always get thrown onto the back burner. It is always easier to work on something big like that as a group than it is as an individual.
I
And
hear you.
it
It, see,
went,
to me, it was, from my point when I'm reading your short, life didn't get easier; it got harder. It just got harder in a different way. In like your
yeah,
very first book, it was survival. A lot of technical expertise is necessary. You got to figure it out on your own. It's a much smaller story.
hmm
But as you added more character, as you added a whole community, things became harder in a different way. You had to manage personalities, you had to manage
yeah,
personnel, you have to manage projects. You have 17 different things happening at the same time that you have to figure out as the main character
hmm
to establish. And if you fail, it's not you dying, it's a whole thousands or millions of people
yeah,
or a whole species
yeah,
dying at that point.
yeah. And also think of it as the look of what happens after the hero comes back victorious. He becomes king, and then all of his problems multiply. It's no
Yeah,
longer him on the solitary journey, it's him taking care of everyone else. And that's the way the real world works. And if there's one thing about my stories, I do try to keep them real in that sense.
you like the social aspect, or that the realism of what would actually happen. I get you, because I
Mhm,
mean the space genre in space probably not so realistic that way, but I see what you mean. Now
mhm.
that kind of leads us into the second part of Aaron's question, was that did you plan for your character to have that arc? Was it like a lit RPG overpowered main character trope, or was it just a matter of pacing that you needed to change in the story?
Um, Actually, him becoming the leader doesn't actually do much for his own individual power. It
Yeah,
doesn't
because
increase. It doesn't
yeah,
increase his strength
because I
directly.
haven't seen him like upgrade any abilities in like a really long time. He's mostly just been managing people and projects.
hmm
And I don't know if you plan to change that, because you mentioned that he's going to go on his own
hmm
at some point, and maybe he'll resume his own character progression. But you're right in that it's kind of been a burden, more than a blessing, as far as like his own character growth.
Yeah. y'all see that more in the next part of the book where he sets down the rules. And I will give y'all a little bit of spoiler because he takes the figurehead approach because he does not want to be the ruler. He becomes the Rex, but basically sits in a council to do all the ruling for him, to give
And to
him
me,
that freedom. Yeah.
that's a smart way to do it. I mean, I've seen some other characters in other series where the main character just tries to do everything, and it kind of becomes a funnel for the character. Like the writer sometimes can't think of what next to do, and they stop publishing sometimes because it becomes like this trap for their character. So I like the fact that you're returning into his own little story a little bit later on.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's kind of going to be all the questions from the audience that we have, man.
That's fine.
Was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
Not really. I spent so much time going over the questions you had asked that I never bothered to think of any of my own.
Hey, no, it's okay. I understand. This is almost like a last minute thing. Like another author had recommended like our LitRPG recommendation list on our site, and
Mm-hmm.
you just contacted me. I'm like, hey, I would love to interview
Yeah.
you. This sounds fun. I'm like, hey, here we are. A
Yeah.
couple of days later. So I get that you didn't have a ton of time to prepare
Mm-hmm.
any other questions.
Yeah, that was frustrated ego from Royal Road, which he does his own continue online, I believe, is
Yeah, and
his.
I think he's publishing his fourth book rather, in the series in August, I think on the 9th, and I'm looking forward to it. I know that particular series isn't for everybody either. It's a little more emotional, psychological. I mean, there's still a bunch of lit RPG stuff like levels and characters and fighting and all that,
Yep.
but it kind of takes a back burner to some of the psychological exploration aspects of the virtual reality. And I was honestly pretty looking forward to talking to that author about it. I'm like, oh, that's a different kind of story. But this is still fun too. I love talking to you, man. I gotta say. So I'm glad that they told you about everything, so that this could happen.
Yep. Yeah. Really though, it's basically come down to I do what I enjoy, and if other people enjoy it as well, you're welcome to come tag along.
And that's a good motto for life. Let me do what I do. I enjoy it. Come along and enjoy my journey, and we can have fun together. That's a great way, I think, to end the podcast. People can find you, of course, on Twitter as again at Viken Henning. You have an Amazon author page. We'll have links to all your books. Universe Online, Enter the Game, and Rise of the Rex, which are Amazon books, and in the show notes for this. And of course, they can also find on Royal Road. You have wonderful stories there. I'll also include the link to your Goodreads section, which has some stuff. People apparently wrote it for you, or they posted it as Goodreads. Yeah, they have a thing there. They don't have a picture for you or anything, but they have your books, and have a little blurb about your stories and stuff. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. I'm sure you have writing stuff to do or things personal to take care of, but you took the time to talk to me, man. So I appreciate you doing so.
Yeah, not a problem, and thank you.
Yeah, no. So if you want to go back to the audience, I'll give a header after that.
Yeah, see you guys later. Enjoy the reads.
Absolutely. So for Geek Bytes Podcast again, I'm Ramon Mejia, and remember to go geek out about something today. Okay. See you, everyone.
Bye bye.